The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has been working on an initiative called Engineering with Nature. It all started in 2010. And this is the EWN Podcast. EWN is developing and implementing nature-based solutions for water and infrastructure projects. It's bringing together a growing international community of scientists, engineers, and researchers from all kinds of disciplines that are committed to harnessing the power of nature to solve problems. The EWN Podcast tells their stories. Now here's your host, Sarah Thorne of Decision Partners.
Well, we're back. Welcome to Season 7, Episode 11. This is our third and final episode of our special series with Katharine Hayhoe, Chief Scientist of the Nature Conservancy. Jeff King, lead of the Engineering with Nature program, and I truly hope that you've been challenged, stimulated, and motivated, as we have been, by our first two conversations with Katharine. Her message is one of hope, and a critical part of her role as a world-renowned climate scientist and passionate advocate for climate action is inspiring others to get involved, to take action. Her point is, you don't have to be a top climate scientist to make a difference. We can all get involved. So today, we pick up the conversation by talking about Katharine's very strong personal and professional goals, including her focus on inspiring people to talk about, think about, then take action on climate change.
As a scientist, I'm a big advocate for understanding the social science of how humans interact with information, because so often we physical and natural scientists, we feel like, oh, you just tell people the truth. Surely they'll do the right thing, right? Well, what social science tells us is no. If we haven't made that head to heart to hands connection, nothing is going to happen in the right direction, especially if we're pushing this giant boulder against the accumulated inertia of our fossil fuel-based economy and society, where all of our infrastructure is built on climate conditions from 50 to 100 years ago rather than today. So I follow the social science very closely, and one of my favorite programs is the Yale Program on Climate Change Communication. They do polling where they ask people a lot of different questions on climate change all around the country. And you can look at their polling results by county, by metro area, by congressional district, and by state. And in fact, they have a wonderful tool where you can generate a fact sheet for your state with just a few clicks. So I was pouring through their data because I was curious to find out what people are really thinking. Because often we assume people are thinking a certain way, but what the social science tells us is that our assumptions are usually wrong. You know, we assume that we care and very few other people do. We assume that we're doing things and nobody else is. So we assume that nobody else is worried except me and my friends. So we need to make everybody else worried, but actually they're already worried. They just don't know what to do. So they don't want to talk about it, because if you're worried and you don't know what to do, why would you want to talk about it? There's very few people who have the personality who enjoy doing that. And I'm not one of them, full disclosure. So I looked at this data from the Yale Program on Climate Change Communication, and I saw that they were showing, and this was already 5 or 6 years ago, they were showing that most people were already worried. Most people agreed that climate change would affect plants and animals, non-human species, that it would affect people in the future, not now, that it would affect people who lived far away in developing countries, not here. But then there was a precipitous drop when they asked the question, do you think it will affect you? Precipitous. The numbers were cut in half. And then there was one more drop below that, which was, do you ever talk about it or hear someone else talk about it? And so that to me was an eye-opener and a game changer. It showed me that there is, like I said, something so simple, so fundamental, so basic to human society and human accomplishments, the idea that we talk about something together. And if we don't talk about it, why would we care? And if we don't care, why would we ever do anything about it? I mean, talking is the requirement to humans working together. And of course, when I say talking, sometimes it could be writing, it could be posting, it could be sharing. It's communication of some sort. Right. It's so integral to what we do that we just take it for granted. And what these polling results showed is that we aren't doing it. And so a huge light bulb went off for me. And that was the idea behind my TED Talk that I gave in 2018 on the most important thing you can do about climate change is talk about it. Of course, talking isn't sufficient, right? But talking is a necessary precursor to action. Not talking again about the head, but making the head to heart to hands connection. Mm-hmm. So I am so invested in this, and the social science subsequently has been so strong, pointing out the impact that we can have when we work to catalyze change within the system, that if you go to my Instagram account or my Threads account, you'll see pinned posts at the top on how to have conversations. I just started a new Instagram account called Talking Climate, as well as my newsletter that I have on email and LinkedIn and Substack called Talking Climate, where my goal is to give people the conversation starters they need, not the doom and gloom about how it's all over and we're all going to die. I have many people asking me if people should be having children. Bringing a child into this life is a radical act of hope. It's a very personal decision that I would never want to advise anyone whether to or whether not to. I myself have one child, and I have one child for various reasons. Climate is just one of them. But what we have to realize is that we have to do something about this. We have to fight for a better future. And one of the organizations I work with in the social science is called Potential Energy. We co-founded an organization called Science Moms together because moms are some of the most effective voices to call for change. And Potential Energy just completed a global survey on the most effective messaging to move the dial on people's willingness to engage in climate action. They found that talking about green jobs and the economic benefits of clean energy is good. They talked about how explaining that fossil fuel-based energy is dirty and expensive is good. They found that talking about how the fossil fuel industry is subsidized to the tune of $7 billion or $7 trillion a year is helpful. But they found the number one message that resonated with the most people around the world is the message of love. Love for our children, for others' children, for the next generation, the need to fight for a better future for all the people and places we love. That is core to what we're doing. So have children or don't have children. That's a personal choice. But whatever you do, fight for that better future for ourselves and for all the children in the world. I just feel like that is the number one motivator for us to keep going when we're worried and anxious and depressed and frustrated and scared. Emotions I all feel quite frequently as a climate scientist, but using those emotions and turning them into the fuel to fight for that better world for the sake of everyone and everything that we love. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Katharine, this gets back to your message of inspiring, to have people think about and envision a brighter future. And I want to share that I had a chance to watch you give an opening talk at the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. And this was back in December of last year. And you invite everybody to the table when it came to talking about climate change and how people can help. And one of the things that I found truly inspiring was that in order to get to a better future, we need to have a vision. And as part of that, we need to have artists be involved and to help us see what that future might hold. And for me, this really gets to that point of diversity that, yes, we need the scientists, we need the ecologists, we need the engineers, we need the social scientists, but you're inviting everybody to the table, including artists. And for me, that really touches a strong sort of position that I have, which is using landscape architecture as a means by which to convey very important information about what is possible in the landscapes and how nature being integrated back into the areas where we live and work and play can be so vital to our overall health and well-being. And so I just truly found that inspiring. And I do think that this idea of being in a position to convey really complex information to everybody, all walks of life, and to be able to have the artists there to help us to see that brighter day is just incredibly valuable.
Thank you, Jeff. I am so glad that resonated with you because, as you know, I feel very passionately about that too. We need people painting the pictures with words, with art, with music, with visual art, with spoken art, with every way we can, we need those visions. Because what neuroscience tells us is that long-term, fear paralyzes us. Fear will give us sort of that knee-jerk reaction to run away from the bear, but it won't sustain us long-term. What sustains us long-term is the possibility of something better.
That's
Not
right.
guaranteed.
That's right.
That would be false hope, because if we just assume everything's going to be better, we'll do nothing and it won't be better. But the idea that if we do everything we can, a better future is possible, and we need to know what that future looks like. So I love the fact that there are artists and musicians, there are composers, there are people working in Hollywood. There's tremendous great work going on, like with good stories in Hollywood, looking how they can not just craft dystopian futures to avoid, but craft a better world that we actually want to live in. These stories are finally starting to be told. They're so powerful, and I think they have the ability to change our culture.
Absolutely. Katharine, I think Jeff and I could talk to you probably forever. I
could talk to you for a very long time too. This is great.
We have a lot of things in common that we haven't even touched on. I do want to talk to you about, what you're doing, where you're going for the rest of the year, and what you're working on. But before I do that, I want to shamelessly plug your book. It's called Saving Us, A Climate Scientist's Case for Hope and Healing in a Divided World. I am listening to the audiobook, which is wonderful because you're narrating it. And I think I'm in chapter 8, but I would really recommend it to our listeners. It's really insightful, but it's also really practical. And Jeff talked about the TED Talks that he's been listening to that you've done. Those are really helpful too. So we'll put those in the show notes. So before we wrap up, we'd like you to talk a little bit about what's ahead for you. What are you working on this year and maybe beyond, Katharine?
Well, that's a great question. And as you can imagine, I have several different irons in the fire, so to speak, because I do so many different things. Mm-hmm. So I'll start with my core science, which I still am a scientist and I still do scientific research. And what I specifically do in the area of atmospheric science is I develop, evaluate, and produce high-resolution climate projections at the level of an individual weather station or a city or a watershed or a county that I've been working for almost 25 years with farmers, water agencies, city planners, in some cases even ski resorts, looking at what the future holds and how we can build resilience and plan to make sure we have the water we need. We're preparing for impacts on people's health. We're ensuring that our crops will still be able to grow. So I've been working on developing a really reliable and robust data set and method that you could apply anywhere in the world, because we're so fortunate in North America. We have a plethora of really good quality, high-resolution climate projections we can work with. When you go outside North America and Western Europe, the picture is completely different. In some places, they don't even have observational data, let alone future projections. They don't even know what's already happened, let alone what's going to happen in the future. And so given that climate change is a justice issue, and given that climate change affects every aspect of our lives, like I said, from water and food to health and the integrity of our infrastructure, I'm trying to provide the resources that people need all across those sectors and all around the world, the equal quality resources if you're in Bangladesh that you would get if you're in Texas. So I've just finished generating a open source, what we call an empirical statistical downscaling model, which is a way to take relatively coarse global scale climate projections and turn them into that highly localized information for the weather station at my airport, for example. And we beta tested it with the U.S. National Climate Assessment. So if you go to the U.S. National Climate Assessment, they have a wonderful interactive climate atlas where you can download maps you can zoom in on your county or your state, and you can look at how, as the world gets warmer, the number of extreme heat days is changing or the number of heavy rainfall days are changing. But now we want to take it global. So that's what I'm working on right now. I've made the code open source. We're running data sets globally. And I'm really excited about that potential to revolutionize climate resilience planning around the world. So that's my academic university hat. But then, of course, I have a big TNC hat with an oak leaf front and center because that is our symbol. And at TNC, as I mentioned before, I am very, very committed to and engaged in supporting our scientists. So I have developed, and we are halfway through rolling out a One Conservancy Science program. And that One Conservancy Science program includes resources to support our scientists and our partners, like a Catalyst Fund where scientists can apply for quick turnaround 2-page grants to support research needed today or yesterday to support a decision that's going to be made on the ground. We've got mentoring and training and education programs. If people want to figure out how do I use climate projections in my work, or how do I engage with social science? We've got webinars and newsletters. We have brand new social media channel on LinkedIn for our science. We're trying to make sure that all of our science is connected across the organization. And as a climate scientist, I am also working very hard to climate proof our work, to make sure that we're looking forward to how climate change would potentially alter the outcomes of our projects. In some cases, that might not be the biggest uncertainty. In other places, it might be. And you don't want to be investing a lot in restoring coastal wetlands in an area where sea level is rising and the coastline is subsiding at record rates. We need to be investing in places where our investment will continue to bring benefits in the future. And then there might even be some other places where climate change is shifting the rainfall patterns or the temperature patterns such that there could be an additional benefit if you looked at, planting a different type of tree that would take up more carbon in a warmer world. So climate proofing our projects is a big part of my focus at the Nature Conservancy. And then external to that, with my outreach and communication, I'm always looking at new ways to reach people. So this year, it's a new Instagram account, Talking Climate. I'm also really working on developing our Science Moms program because mothers who are scientists reaching other mothers who care about their kids' future can be so powerful as an advocacy. And then also I work a lot with faith-based communities. So I partner with the Young Evangelicals for Climate Action, with the Evangelical Environmental Network, with BioLogos, which is a science and Christian-based organization, and I'm the climate ambassador for the World Evangelical Alliance. The World Evangelical Alliance has an annual meeting once every 5 or 6 years in person, and one of them is coming up this year, and I'm going to be the first plenary speaker on climate change at an organization that represents 600 million evangelicals around the world. So these are just a few of the things that I'm super excited about in the year to come.
Well, Katharine, when do you find time to sleep? My goodness. That's a long list of activities and certainly very, very exciting. And really, please do try to keep us updated on all these many different efforts that you have underway. One of the things that you said there that really resonated for me was thinking about future anticipated scenarios in terms of climate and what we could be conceivably looking at in different ecoregions and wanting to be sort of ahead of the curve in terms of how we plan and develop those areas going forward, whether or not we need to be investing in wetland systems or different types of mangrove systems, depending on the climates that we might see in the future. And that reminds me of, Wayne Gretzky as a hockey player and thinking about, how did he know or how was he able to do so well with scoring goals, and he basically said, well, I just skate to where I think or know that the puck is going to be. And I think that's exactly what you're saying here too, is that we need to be thinking well out into the future and then leaning into those certain outcomes that we can anticipate and planning accordingly. So that was exciting to hear, among the many things that you shared with us.
Well, I love that quote. All good Canadians know that quote. And you're right. I had never connected the dots, but that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm trying to tell people where the puck will be. And a number of years ago, before the pandemic, I actually participated with colleagues to create a manual for federal highways to figure out where the puck will be on transportation infrastructure design. But
Very
I think
good.
that we very much need that in the natural climate solution sphere. I was actually speaking with Johan Rockström about that just a couple of months ago, because of course he's a scientist who focuses very much on climate and nature as well. And that's really what we need, because a lot of our projects are still working on where the puck is. We need to be looking at where the puck will be, so that when it gets there, we are 100% prepared for what's coming. Because again, fixing climate change is not the goal. The goal is a better, more resilient, safer, more abundant future. And climate change is the hurdle that stands between us and that future.
Well said.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Katharine, it has been simply a breath of fresh air talking with you today. I truly believe we could talk to you for another hour and we'd still have a million more things to talk about. Thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you for inspiring us and for inspiring our listeners about what we can do and what actions we can take. I mean, one of the things that we can do to make a difference is just talk about climate and talk about climate change and how it's affecting us. And I hope that our podcast conversation opens the door for people to have their own conversation. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. We know you've got an incredibly busy schedule.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Katharine, I too want to say thank you so much for the time that you've spent with us today. And I have just thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I know you're incredibly busy, and for you to spend this time with us means a lot. And I know our listeners will really appreciate it too. And the message, so many wonderful thoughts here. The message I just really am drawn to is this head to heart to hands. I just really want to be able to use that and to speak to it and to see that put into practice in the Engineering with Nature program as well. So thank you for sharing that thought with us as well.
Thank you, Jeff.
And Jeff, I think you've outdone yourself on this show, bringing Wayne Gretzky to Canadians and a Canadian producer, especially during the Stanley Cup playoffs. That's really over the top for an American scientist. So we thank you for that. And to all of you, thank you so much for listening. We hope that you've enjoyed this podcast. We hope that you'll be inspired to take action. And we sure hope you'll join us again when we talk about engineering with nature.
You've been listening to the EWN podcast, developed by Sarah Thorne and Jeff King, National Lead, Engineering with Nature Initiative, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Now, for more information, you can visit our website, engineeringwithnature.org. The EWN podcast is produced by iContact Productions for the Engineering with Nature program within the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I'm Dave Trafford.